The construction industry in Kenya is a critical cog in the development of Kenya's economy. The sector contributes between 5 and 6.5% of economic growth every year. But the sector is undergoing major challenges. This week on Inside Government, our focus is on the built environment, and we are talking to the Executive Director of the National Construction Authority, Engineer Maurice Okech. Thank you very much indeed, Engineer, for joining us on this week's episode of Inside Government.
Thank you, Brian, and welcome to National Construction Authority for this opportunity to share with Kenyans what it is about the construction industry and what we do as National Construction Authority to be able to ensure safety and well-being of the citizens, as well as the safeguard of investments, especially in the construction sector in Kenya. So welcome.
When you look at the construction industry here in Kenya, there are about 12 players, from different fields, and the National Construction Authority is one of them. Could you kindly please take us through what is your role in the construction industry in Kenya?
National Construction Authority is a government agency charged with the responsibility of regulating the construction sector in Kenya. And the main mandate is focusing on overseeing and coordinating the development in the construction sector. And within that main mandate, we have we've classified our several functions, about 14 into 3 classes of function or pillars, as you may call it. One of them is a regulatory function. It is a requirement that for any business entity to call themselves or regard themselves as a contractor, that particular entity must have a registration and get license from National Construction Authority to be able to be regarded to have qualified to do a job that is guaranteed to provide quality, safe, and well-constructed works. So in terms of licensing of contractors, we do this to both local and foreign contractors, and we categorize them. We register them into 8 categories. Our category 1 is the largest construction entity or company, and category 8 is the smallest, basically the SME, the entry business level of a company in construction would be registered in category 8. Of course, 1 is the big boys, or big girls, if you may call it, to be gender sensitive. And here is where you also expect foreign contractors to be registered. There is no foreign contractor that can get NCA license if after evaluation, using the evaluation criteria, do not meet the requirement for category 1 contractor. Because we only say you come if you have the size and capacity and the muscle to fit in category 1. Of course, category 2 up to 8 is reserved for local contractors only. But aside from the categories, we also have the classes of work. For instance, you can have category 1 in the class of roadworks, in the class of building works, in the class of waterworks, in the class of electrical, mechanical, or any specialized work that fall along those ones. And this means that you can be category 1 in roadworks, so we expect you not to do any jobs in category in a building works because you are specific to that particular skill set. So you have the capacity, but to do a certain specific job. The other aspect under regulatory, because I said there are 3 classes: regulatory, capacity building, and of course advisory. So under regulatory, we still have others like accreditation of site supervisors and skilled construction workers. This is very key. Remember, having licensed a contractor and having given a contractor a job in terms of a contract by a project owner or a developer or a client, it is expected that this contractor will be using people we call fundis, and the people we call foremen who will be overseeing the fundis as they work. These fundis are the ones we call skilled construction workers, and each one of them, for them to profess to say that they have qualification, they need to have an accreditation from National Construction Authority. And we have a criteria, meaning that we have to look at the experience of this fundi, we have to look at the skill set, and register you or accredit you in the trade. The trade is the skill set you qualify for. And this is just to say That's very important because you would not expect to employ a fundi who is a mason on electrical works or a fundi who is a plumber or another thing. So this accreditation gives assurance to the user or the employer of this particular fundi or in terms of their qualification. Mm-hmm. And we have 59 trades that we have in the country. Majority of us can count up to around 7. You can count a mason, plumber, electrician, carpenter, painter, but there are so many.
But when you look at the challenges, that this industry is facing, they go beyond the time that you came into into existence as NCA. To what extent have you managed to bring down the levels of malpractices in this industry?
Well, let's first appreciate and recognize the fact that the industry has grown significantly in terms of number of projects, number of investments. As you can see, our country, if you compare 10 years ago and today, there's quite a lot of monumentous projects that have taken place in terms of construction in this space. And what that means, this also had to do with increased level of activity and sometimes level of challenges. So as National Construction Authority, with the database we have, with the data we collect and the records we have all projects registered in our database, the ones who have complied. So one thing that is there is that with the increased level of project activity, there is also those challenges that you have mentioned. And occasionally, you would find some of challenges, including collapsing structures happening from time to time. But one thing that we've also observed in terms of those projects that go through those challenges of collapses, that they have a common thread, that they have not met the necessary compliance requirements. Some of them we have stopped even from, suspended from construction, but they continue defying those suspension orders. They continue doing construction. Then eventually, unfortunately, the building collapses. And the most unfortunate thing is that sometimes there are loss of lives, loss of investment, and of course also affecting the economy.
From the counties to the engineers board to the board of architectural association, when you look at this industry, what would you say is the biggest challenge facing that sector?
There are two pathways here. There's the first pathway of the process flow to get a compliant construction up to the end. And there's the aspect of the players coming to ensure that there's compliance. So these regulators, as they play in this space, as you start your project and get professionals to be able to design, put it in context, give it quality from the papers from onset on paper, it's expected that by the time a developer is submitting their project for approval at the county level, it has been done by an architect who is licensed by the board of registration of architects and quantity surveyors. So the borax here, the role would have been to get a licensed architect. They also, of course, licensed quantity surveyors. At the same time, you also expected to get a structural engineer who has looked at this particular, if it's a building project, has looked at these architectural plans and done a design to respond to the wishes of the architectural design. And this particular engineer is also regulated by Engineers Board of Kenya. So the role the two regulators are playing at that particular instance is to ensure that the people they are used on this side to develop these designs are qualified as per the standards of the regulator and the requirements for registration. Then, when now you move to site, having received all the approvals, including the environmental approval, you need a contractor who is also approved by National Construction Authority to ensure that the project you are doing and the person undertaking the project is a qualified contractor. So you see, there is this side of the service provider, professional, the architect, the quantity surveyor, the engineer, and the contractor. And this side, where the process must also follow.
Number of players in this industry. Could this also be one of the challenges that the industry is facing?
Well, what there is that there need to be more structured coordination or structured way of dealing with the what we call the touch points. So that, for instance, I'll give you an example of what happens sometimes. You realize sometimes you go, when during our normal routine quality assurance or compliance checks, we go to site today, we carry out our activity, and then the following, after a few days, another agency would come. After a few days, another agency would come. All we need is that at the time an agency has visited that site, it should be a trigger if there is non-compliance to communicate or give feedback to all the other agencies in the value chain, so that at least they're aware and they take action accordingly, so that there is nowhere to run to.
Some of you are regulators. Is there any point of convergence? Is there a point where you meet as, for example, regulators to say that this project is not going to the required or laid down guidelines, and so we need to stop it?
As a way forward in that aspect of coordination, we have now come up with what we call a multi-agency approach, because this is very effective. Because each agency, as you know it, have their own unique strengths and unique requirements, and they have also unique instruments or the legal instruments that are put them together. And truly so, they are necessary. So what we have now done is to put in place what we call a multi-sectoral or multi-agency approach, where we have periodic meetings to discuss, especially on aspects that border on projects that are not compliant. This is very key. And sometimes we also do what we call joint operations. This has started in the last few years, especially with the county of Nairobi and the county of Kiambu. And we want to move out to other counties as well, so that at least we have a joint approach to coordination, so that at least at the end of the day, whether you're a developer, a contractor, and any profession, there is, as I said, you cannot run anywhere. And also on board, we have brought what we call enforcement unit, because you know, our acts, various pieces of legislation, do not have power to take, we call arresting powers also, because sometimes, you know, there may be some notorious nature or notorious actions that require that kind of action of arrest. So now
Prosecution.
And prosecution. And now working with the Ministry of Interior, we've recently been given on board some police officers who are now fully attached to the National Construction Authority, and we are working collaboratively with other agencies to support this, by especially those sites that have continuously defied the suspension orders, and we take action. They are taken to court, and as we speak now, there are quite a number of cases that are running in court for the projects that have not followed the requirement.
You carried out an audit of about buildings in this country that were under construction, and you know, the verdict was you audited about 140,000 buildings, and 58,000 of those were found to be non-compliant to various regulations. Why would that be the case in a situation whereby you have about 12 players who are supposed to ensure there is compliance?
In our routine normal compliance visits, for the last 7 or so years, it's true we've carried out inspections on over 100,000, or to be specific, 108,000 out there. Out of these, 58,000 have been found to be non-compliant. And non-compliance here means that out of the 7 checklist items that we normally use as our yardstick when you come for a compliance check, out of those 7 checklist items, either you have a compliance certificate or registered, you're not the project is registered with NCA, you have a licensed contractor, you have professionals on that project, health and safety issues you are dealing with, even hoarding and so on and so forth, even having accredited construction worker and site supervisor, all these items, any one of them, if we find to be uncompliant, they will constitute those 58,000. So some of them could be very severe in terms of giving a warning sign in terms of safety of the structure. Some of them could be minor to the extent that when they're addressed, the building can continue. What we have also done is advising the developers whose sites have been found to be non-compliant, especially if it's bordering on structural safety, to hire an independent structural engineer to carry out an audit of that particular building and send that report to us. Failure to do so, we send our own audit team to carry out, and if the building is found suspect, we advise you what to do. Either ask you to do what we call remedial measures. If it's not remediable or cannot be remedied, then you're asked to bring it down. Like in this particular case, already there are 13 buildings that are out there that need to go through either be brought down by the developers, the owners, and within a certain period, if they don't, then they need to be brought down.
NCA, I mean, you're just one of the players in this industry, and which means that you know, for you to be effective, the other players also have to be effective, and they must play their role, you know, accordingly. And one of the challenges facing this industry and why we're having so many buildings, you know, collapsing is because of substandard materials. That does not fall under your purview. It falls under the purview of Kenya Bureau of Standards. How can this be addressed?
We have actually identified all these aspects and challenges and areas that actually lead to buildings collapsing. Substandard material is just one of them. And of course, there are also quite a number where also there could be a lack of engaging a qualified professional to do the job, or not engaging a licensed contractor, or poor workmanship, because you could be having good materials, but the workmanship here is also a challenge, where now the fundi comes in. Now, in the aspect, to address your question on the issue of substandard materials, what we have done, working in collaboration with the Kenya Bureau of Standards, we have entered into a framework where we are developing a standardization framework that will now look at the material approval, especially construction-related materials, where now we'll have either emerging materials or existing materials, because materials now also keep coming into the market, especially to onboard the innovation, because we are very keen in terms of innovation, even as an agency. Well, that's one of our core values, innovation. And we are encouraging materials that can also reduce in terms of cost, enhance safety, and of course also improve quality. And how do we do this? So we currently we have a working arrangement with Kenya Bureau of Standards to develop a standardization framework to address that issue. In fact, one thing that has also started happening, that whenever a collapse occurs, unfortunately so, we don't, it is our desire that none collapse happens, but when they do occur, we have now a scenario or arrangement where all of us have to do our role and get to the site of the collapse and do we'll be doing our part. KEBS will be coming there to pick the materials for testing and also advising the industry on what to do. So we are now working very closely together, and we're also conducting a lot of sensitization and training on the material users, so that at least they know what to do, they are also aware. I'll give you a very good example. Sometimes you go to a site which is under construction, and after collapse is when you realize there's even a material that is being used that has been since banned a few years ago from use and is still in use. That means that with close collaboration and working relationship with KEBS, this will be a thing of the past.
Also, when you talk about addressing the issue of poor workmanship, and this is where you come in as an authority because you are the regulator. What are you doing to ensure that, number one, you root out quack contractors in the market, unqualified and unskilled workmanship in this industry as well?
In 2016, we identified 59 trade areas. These 59 trade areas have 56 technical trades and 3 are in soft skills. Soft skills basically is how, as a tradesman and woman, as a construction worker, you need to conduct yourself. Issues of hygiene. You don't need to come to someone's house with looking untidy and so on and so forth. But looking at the 56, we identified them through stakeholder approach. And one thing I want to say about this is that we, with these occupational standards of 59 trades, we have been working together with the National Industrial Training Authority, NITA. You realize in government we have to work collaboratively because NITA has got a very key mandate in terms of training. So, and we are now doing what we call on-site training because on-site it's real time, it is actual environment, it is the real deal. So in this on-site training arrangement, we have developed 2 kind of approaches. There's apprenticeship approach for the beginner or an amateur, and there's the skill enhancement approach. So for the beginner, we are just doing what we call recognition of prior skills and working with this team on the ground. And of course, we have to also be working close collaboration with the contractor, who is now the project owner, because the site belongs to the contractor until they are handed over back to the client. We are doing this training, and once the training is done, we now do what we call, they have to go to NITA for testing and assessment, and once they get that trade test, now we can now accredit them and onboard them as part of a registered or accredited construction worker.
Your staff have also been accused of integrity issues, receiving bribes from unscrupulous contractors, to approve substandard projects. How are you dealing with that internally?
Well, I know this has been, cases, people have been, a lot of talks are out there, but one thing that is very important that you need to know, first of all, as National Construction Authority, we have employed qualified staff, professionals in their own area. Number 1, we have onboarded engineers, architects, quantity surveyors, construction project managers, and those who actually qualify to do to interact with the construction sector. One thing I know is that occasionally we get reports that our officers have been involved. We have those particular cases investigated and action taken, appropriate action taken for those who are found to be culpable. And I'm also aware that because we have very good laws in terms of dealing with ethical issues or corruption, we also have where the case, as the case may be, whistleblowing, where now if such a case is found, it's reported to the ESCC. In
2016, the government, through an executive order, removed the construction levies, where you used to derive almost 70% of your revenue. And this, of course, had a major impact on, number 1, on research, on hiring of building inspectors and so much, and of course, training. How bad has the situation been for you as an institution?
In January 2017, in order to promote the ease of doing business, the government set aside the collection of the construction levy, the construction industry, and we were also given assurance that will be supported through the exchequer, in which case we've been getting very good support. So now what we are now doing is working with the budget, approved of course, and then with the support we get from the GOK from time to time. But there was a flip of now the revenue stream. So before the levy was scrapped, as you've rightfully put it, or it was set aside, we were getting 70-30. So it means there was 30 from exchequer, we're still supported by government, and then we were getting 70 from our own internally generated revenue. After the setting aside of the levy through the executive order in January 2017, now it flipped from 30/70.
On the issues of hiring of new staff, not just at the ministerial level, but even at the parastatal level, has this impacted you when it comes to hiring more personnel, like site inspectors and so much?
There are two ways of looking at this in terms of responding to that particular very important item, because human resource is one of the key resources an institution organization needs to have and relies on to be able to support the operations and get things moving. Of course, you also need money to support the human resource and other activities. So to the extent of what you are alluding to in terms of freezing, employment freeze, as you are aware, that was until March this year when the lifting of that freeze happened. And now, based on our staff establishment and the numbers that we still have as vacancies, we are now free to fill, of course, subject to getting necessary approvals as the circular that lifted the freeze guided. So as we speak now, the freeze is not in place, and the hiring, in fact, we've gotten very good support from the Treasury, where now, as we speak, as well as from our ministry, as we speak now, we are in the process of filling the vacancies that have been there before. Of course, it will be in public there. I think recently we advertised already for some positions. We got quite a number of applications. The process is still on. I don't want to talk so much about it, but I know those who applied are aware, and we're going through it's a competitive process. And also the other thing that is also very key to human capacity is the aspect of the staff establishment.
And so, because we have to come to the end of this conversation, if somebody was to ask you, how bad is the level of non-compliance in Kenya's construction industry, what would you tell them?
Number one, I would say we are at a 50% non-compliance level as per our records, as per our daily activities in terms of compliance checks, and we need to reduce it to zero non-compliance. That's our aim. Because what does a non-compliant mean? Non-compliance. It means that out there, you're actually working in a place that is 50% wanting in terms of safety. It may mean, as I said, some non-compliance items are minor, but the major ones is that could be lack of structural safety, and that's a very key issue. So what my advice is for any other player in the sector is that collectively, let's do what we need to do to ensure we get it right. Let's plan to implement what we can do within our budget so that we don't have to do any shortcuts because our budget is not supporting what we want to invest. So let the investments be supported by budgets that are within the budget threshold. Let's ensure that we have the right professionals. If it is a building, you have an architect to define the spaces for you, the aesthetics, and all that you need in terms of the beauty and the ambience. Look for the structural engineer to ensure that the structural safety is well guaranteed. Number one, you need those designs well done by a qualified structural engineer, registered and having a valid license from Engineers Board of Kenya. Ensure that you have your costs gotten right for you, because the professional in charge of cost control is actually the quantity surveyor. He'll advise you that the budget you have, which is the X amount, you'll be able to do that project you have designed for, and then get the right contractor that will be has the capacity to do that job. And then that contractor will hire the fundis that have been accredited by National Construction Authority. Of course, all this has to go be done through the necessary approvals by other regulators that are in the sector. So just to bring the point home and to ensure that we are working very closely together, it is good also to mention that National Construction Authority, Engineers Board of Kenya, and the Board of Registration architects and quantity surveyors, BORACs, have already signed MOU, a working arrangement which ensures that we work together for the sake and the safety of the built environment. And that's very key. Yeah.
Engineer, thank you very much for sharing those insights with us. Thank you. Your time is highly appreciated. Well, Engineer Maurice Akech is the Executive Director at the National Construction Authority, joining us this week on Inside Government to appraise us on where we are and the challenges that the construction industry is facing and how they are addressing them as an industry or as players. Well, my name is O'Brien Kimani. This has been Inside Government. Thank you very much indeed for your time. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.